The maid leaned close to her Mafia boss during his biggest meeting and whispered, "Shut up. Someone's listening." She knew he could end her for that disrespect. What she didn't know, those 2 words would expose a traitor, destroy his enemies, and transform her from invisible help into the one person he trusted most. Clara Reyes had learned 3 survival rules in her 2 months working at the DeLuca mansion. Keep your eyes down, your mouth shut, and never, ever interrupt the boss during a meeting. Tonight, she was about to break all 3. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight as she balanced a silver tray outside Lorenzo de Luca's private study. Through the heavy oak door, she could hear voices, tense, urgent, the kind that made the hair on her arms stand up. She'd been summoned to refresh drinks, which meant slipping in silently, doing her job, and becoming invisible again. She pushed the door open. The study was thick with cigar smoke and tension. 6 men sat around the mahogany table, Lorenzo's inner circle, the ones who ran everything from the docks to downtown Chicago. Lorenzo himself sat at the head, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate even at this late hour, his dark eyes sharp as he gestured at a map spread across the table. "The Northside Territory is vulnerable," Lorenzo was saying, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "Russo's crew is stretched thin after last month's raid. We move in with 3 teams." Clara moved along the wall like a ghost, just as she'd been taught. "Refill the glasses. Don't make eye contact. Don't listen to words that could get you killed." But then she heard it. Click, click, click. A faint sound, rhythmic and mechanical, coming from behind the ornate wall molding near Lorenzo's chair. She'd dusted that very spot this afternoon and noticed the baseboard was slightly loose. At the time, she'd made a mental note to mention it to maintenance. Now, in the dead of night with Lorenzo discussing territory seizures and payoffs, that clicking sound meant something entirely different. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd grown up in the rougher parts of Southside, where you learn to recognize danger in all its forms. Her older brother had done time for running with the wrong crowd, and before he'd gotten himself killed in a gang dispute, he taught her things. Street things. Survival things. One of those things was what a listening device sounded like when it was actively transmitting. Click, click, click. She set down the crystal decanter with trembling hands. Lorenzo was still talking, outlining the attack plan, naming names, mentioning dollar amounts that made her stomach turn. Every word was floating through that wall into God knows whose ears. The men around the table were absorbed in the discussion. One of them, Paulie Marchetti, Lorenzo's right hand, was arguing about timing. Another was marking positions on the map. No one was paying attention to the maid. Clara looked at Lorenzo. Really looked at him for the first time since she'd started working here. He was only 34, young for a man with so much blood on his hands, with dark Italian features and the kind of face that could charm or terrify depending on his mood. Right now, that face was focused, intense, completely unaware that everything he was saying was being recorded. "He'll kill you for interrupting," a voice whispered in her head. "He'll think you're the one who planted it." But another voice, her brother's voice from years ago, cut through her fear. "You see something wrong. You say something. Silence gets people killed." Clara made her decision. She moved to Lorenzo's chair, her legs somehow carrying her forward even though they felt like water. She reached for his empty glass, leaning in close enough to catch the scent of his expensive cologne mixed with cigar smoke. And then she whispered, directly into his ear, so quiet that only he could possibly hear. "Shut up. Someone's listening." 4 words. That's all it took to change everything. Lorenzo's body went rigid for a fraction of a second, so brief that anyone not watching closely would have missed it. But Clara felt it, felt the coiled violence in him wind even tighter. His hand, resting on the table, curled into a fist. Then, like a master actor, he smoothed out his expression. His smile returned, easy and charismatic. He picked up his refilled glass and took a sip, his eyes never once flickering to Clara. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice suddenly lighter, almost jovial. It's late, and we've covered enough ground for tonight. Polly, you'll coordinate with the teams tomorrow. Marco, get those shipment manifests to me by noon. We'll reconvene in 48 hours. The men looked confused. Polly frowned. Boss, we haven't finished discussing that. Tomorrow, Lorenzo cut him off smoothly, standing up. I have an early meeting with the city councilman. Can't have him thinking I'm not a respectable businessman. The joke fell flat, but the men recognized a dismissal when they heard one. They gathered their papers, their phones, their unfinished cigars. Within 3 minutes, the study was empty except for Lorenzo and Clara. The door clicked shut. Clara stood frozen by the wall, the silver tray clutched in her white-knuckled hands. Lorenzo hadn't moved from his position at the table. He stared at the wall panel where the clicking had come from, his jaw working. When he finally turned to look at her, his eyes were black ice. Show me, he said quietly. Clara's mouth went dry. She set down the tray and walked to the wall on shaking legs. She knelt down, pointing to the baseboard molding near his chair. There, she whispered. Behind that panel. It's clicking. I heard it this afternoon too, but I didn't realize. Lorenzo crouched beside her, his ear close to the wall. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock and Clara's rapid breathing. Then she saw it, the slight tightening around Lorenzo's eyes, the way his jaw clenched. He'd heard it too. He stood abruptly and pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. Then he looked at Clara, really looked at her for the first time since she'd started working in his house. What's your name? He asked. Clara Reyes, sir. How long have you worked here, Clara? 2 months, sir. He studied her face like he was committing it to memory. Don't leave this room. Don't say a word to anyone about what you heard tonight. Not my men, not the other staff, not even your own family. Do you understand? Clara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Good. Lorenzo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because you might have just saved my life. 20 minutes later, a man arrived who looked nothing like Lorenzo's usual crew. Marcus Webb was 40-something, thin and wiry, wearing jeans and a faded Northwestern University hoodie. He carried a battered backpack and had the distracted air of a college professor. Clara, still standing nervously by the bookshelf where Lorenzo had told her to wait, would never have guessed this unassuming man was one of the most sought-after tech security experts in the Midwest. Marco. Lorenzo greeted him with a brief handshake. Thanks for coming on short notice. You said it was urgent. Marcus's eyes swept the room with professional assessment. Where? Lorenzo pointed to the wall panel. My maid heard something. Clicking sound. Rhythmic. Marcus didn't waste time asking questions. He dropped his backpack and pulled out what looked like a modified tablet with strange attachments. Clara watched, fascinated despite her fear, as he moved slowly along the wall, holding the device at different angles. A green light on the screen pulsed steadily. Then it turned red. Son of a bitch, Marcus breathed. He knelt down by the baseboard, pulling out a small toolkit. Lorenzo, kill your phone.
Now.
Lorenzo powered down his phone without hesitation. That bad. Worse, Marcus was already working on the panel, carefully prying it loose with specialized tools that looked almost surgical. This thing is broadcasting. Active transmission. Has been for, he checked his tablet, at least 6 hours, maybe longer. Clara's stomach dropped. 6 hours meant it had been running during the entire meeting she'd just witnessed. The panel came free, and Marcus carefully reached into the cavity behind it. When he pulled his hand out, he was holding something small, about the size of a matchbox, covered in tiny circuit boards and what looked like a miniature antenna. Jesus Christ, Lorenzo muttered, leaning in close. Marcus set the device on the table with extreme care, like it might explode. He pulled out a small signal jammer from his bag and activated it. A low hum filled the room. Okay, we're dark now. Nothing's getting in or out of this room electronically. He studied the device under a magnified lens, taking photographs from different angles. Clara crept closer, unable to help herself. Up close, the thing looked impossibly complex, a nightmare of miniaturized technology. Talk to me, Marcus, Lorenzo said quietly. His voice was calm, but Clara could see the white of his knuckles as he gripped the back of a chair. Military-grade surveillance equipment. Marcus pointed to a specific component with a pen. See this chip? That's encrypted transmission technology. Government level. NSA, FBI, maybe CIA. And this here, he indicated the antenna, has a range of about 5 miles with relay capacity. Whoever's listening doesn't need to be anywhere close. Can you trace the signal? Already working on it. Marcus pulled out a laptop and connected it to his tablet with a specialized cable. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The transmission frequency is... Hold on, more typing. Got it. They're using a civilian bandwidth, but the encryption is military. Smart. Wouldn't show up on standard bug sweeps. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. How long has it been there? Marcus examined the device more closely, looking at dust patterns and oxidation on the circuits. Based on the environmental exposure, I'd say minimum 3 weeks. Maybe longer. 3 weeks. Clara saw Lorenzo's face go pale beneath his olive complexion. 3 weeks of conversations, meetings, phone calls. 3 weeks of complete exposure. Who could do this? Lorenzo asked. Who has access to this kind of tech? Your enemies, obviously. Marcus didn't look up from his laptop. But this isn't street-level equipment. This isn't even mob-level equipment. Someone with serious resources wanted inside your head. Either they've got government connections, or they paid a fortune to someone who does. Clara found her voice, surprising herself. Could it be? I mean, could the police? Police would need a warrant. Marcus cut her off, though not unkindly. And if they had a warrant, they'd be raiding this place, not listening quietly. No, this is private sector. Someone who wants intelligence, but can't use official channels. Rival families, Lorenzo said, more to himself than to them. The Russians have been pushing into our territory. The Russos have been quiet since we hit their operations. He stopped, his face darkening. They've heard everything. The weight of that realization hung in the air like smoke. Clara thought about the meeting she'd interrupted tonight. The discussion of vulnerable territories, the plans for raids, the names of corrupted officials. All of it recorded, transmitted, analyzed by whoever was on the other end of that signal. Can you find them? Lorenzo asked, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Marcus's laptop beeped. He studied the screen, zooming in on what looked like a map of Chicago. The signal's being received here. He tapped a location downtown. High-rise apartment building on North Michigan Avenue. Expensive real estate. I can get you the exact unit, but it'll take a few hours to narrow it down. Do it, Lorenzo turned to Clara, and she instinctively took a step back. But his expression wasn't angry. It was calculating. Clara, I need to know exactly when you first heard that clicking sound. This afternoon, sir. Around 3 o'clock. I was dusting and I heard it, but it was quiet, so I thought maybe it was pipes or something in the wall. And you didn't mention it to anyone?
No, sir.
I was going to tell maintenance tomorrow, but then she trailed off. Lorenzo nodded slowly. That might have saved us. If you'd reported it through normal channels, someone might have tipped them off that we were suspicious. He paused. How many people know you heard it? Just you and Mr. Webb, sir.
Good.
It stays that way. He turned back to Marcus. I want a full sweep of this entire house. Every room, every phone line, every computer. If there's one bug, there might be more. Marcus was already packing up his equipment. I'll need my full team for that. It'll take all night. Then get them here. Lorenzo's voice was steel. And Marcus?
Nobody hears about this.
Not your team, not your wife, not your priest. This information could start a war. As Marcus headed for the door, he paused and looked back at Clara.
You've got good ears, miss.
Better than my $50,000 equipment. That clicking sound? Most people would never have noticed it. After he left, Clara stood alone with Lorenzo in the study. The device sat on the table between them, dark and silent now behind Marcus's jammer. But somehow it felt like it was still watching, still listening. Lorenzo poured himself a whiskey, his hand steady despite everything. You should go home, Clara.
Get some rest.
Tomorrow, everything continues as normal. You do your job, I do mine. Nobody can know anything's changed. Yes, sir. Clara started toward the door, then hesitated. Mr. DeLuca? Who do you think did this? Lorenzo stared at the bug, his expression unreadable. Someone who just made a very serious mistake. The next morning, Clara arrived at the mansion at 6 a.m. as usual, her stomach in knots. She'd barely slept, replaying the previous night over and over in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that tiny device on Lorenzo's table, imagining invisible signals carrying deadly secrets through the air. She expected chaos, FBI raids, bodies in the courtyard, something dramatic. Instead, she found the mansion exactly as she'd left it. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows. The other maids were already working, gossiping about a reality show as they polished silver. The chef hummed while preparing breakfast. Everything was normal. Clara tied on her apron with shaking hands and started her rounds, dusting the upstairs hallway. Through an open door, she could see Lorenzo in his office, on the phone, laughing about something. He looked relaxed, almost carefree in his crisp white shirt and navy slacks. It made no sense. Around 9, she was cleaning the second-floor library when Polly Marchetti appeared in the doorway. Lorenzo's right-hand man was built like a bear, with thick arms and a face that had seen too many fights. He'd always made Clara nervous. "Boss wants to see you," Polly said gruffly. "Private study."
Now.
Clara's heart hammered as she followed him down the stairs. Polly didn't speak, didn't even look at her. When they reached the study, he knocked twice and opened the door, gesturing for her to enter alone. Lorenzo sat behind his mahogany desk. Marcus Webb stood by the window, and beside him was a man Clara recognized as Tony Greco, Lorenzo's head of security, a former Marine with cold gray eyes and a reputation for being absolutely loyal. 3 people, just like Lorenzo had said last night. "Sit down, Clara." Lorenzo gestured to a chair across from his desk. His tone was businesslike, but not unkind. She sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Marcus finished his sweep at 4 this morning," Lorenzo began. "Want to tell her what you found?" Marcus looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. 2 more devices. One in the main corridor phone junction box, routing all landline calls. Another in Lorenzo's car. That one was tracking his movements and recording conversations. He pulled up images on his tablet, showing Clara more of those nightmare circuit boards. Same military-grade equipment. Same transmission frequency. Someone invested serious money into this operation. Clara felt sick. The invasion was even worse than she'd imagined. "Here's what we're going to do," Lorenzo said, leaning forward. "Nothing." Clara blinked. "Sir? We're not removing the bugs. We're not changing security protocols. We're not acting suspicious in any way." Lorenzo's dark eyes held hers. "As far as anyone knows, and I mean anyone, including my own men, last night's meeting ended early because I was tired. Nothing more." "I don't understand," Clara said carefully. Tony Greco spoke for the first time, his voice gravelly. "Whoever planted those bugs is watching for a reaction. If we suddenly beef up security, sweep for more devices, change our patterns, they'll know we found them. They'll either pull back or accelerate whatever they're planning." "But they're listening to everything," Clara protested. "Exactly." A thin smile crossed Lorenzo's face. "And that's going to be their downfall." Marcus traced the transmission to an apartment on North Michigan Avenue, Unit 4207. "It's registered under a shell company. Took us half the night to dig through the paperwork, but we found the connection." "Guess who owns that shell company?" Clara shook her head. "A holding corporation linked to the Volkov family." Lorenzo's smile turned cold. "The Russians. They've been trying to push into our territory for 2 years, and we've blocked them at every turn. This is how they've been staying one step ahead. They've been listening to our playbook." The pieces clicked together in Clara's mind. "So, if you let them keep listening." "We control what they hear," Lorenzo finished. "We feed them exactly what we want them to know. False information, fake plans, bait they can't resist. And while they're chasing ghosts, We figure out who inside my operation helped them plant these bugs in the first place. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. You think someone here betrayed you? Those devices didn't install themselves, Tony Greco said flatly. Someone had access to this house, to Lorenzo's car, to our security systems. Either we've got a mole, or someone got careless enough to let an enemy operative slip through. Which is why, Lorenzo continued, only 4 people know about this. Me, Marcus, Tony, and you. Not Polly, not my cousin Frankie, not even my consigliera. Nobody. The fewer people who know, the easier it is to spot unusual behavior. What do you want me to do? Clara asked.
Your job.
Exactly as you've always done it, Lorenzo's expression softened slightly. I know this is a lot to put on someone who just came here to clean houses and make rent. But you've proven you've got good instincts and you can keep your mouth shut. Those are rare qualities. Marcus pulled out a small device, about the size of a key fob. If you hear or see anything suspicious, and I mean anything that feels off, press this button. It sends a silent alert to all 3 of our phones. No names, no details, just an alert. We'll handle it from there. Clara took the device, feeling its weight in her palm. It was heavier than it looked.
One more thing, Lorenzo said.
In a few hours, I'm going to call another meeting in that same study. Same men, same topic. But this time, everything I say will be a lie. We're going to test the system, see if the Russians take the bait. I need you in there serving drinks, acting completely normal.
Can you do that?
Clara thought about her brother, dead at 26 because he'd chosen loyalty to the wrong people. She thought about her mother working 2 jobs to keep them fed after he was gone. She thought about how hard she'd worked to stay clean of the streets, to build a decent life. Now here she was, sitting in a Mafia boss's study, being recruited into some kind of counterintelligence operation. I can do it, she said quietly. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then nodded.
Good.
Tony will brief you on what to watch for. And Clara? He waited until she met his eyes. Thank you. Most people would have kept walking last night. You didn't. My brother used to say silence gets people killed, Clara said. Smart man, your brother. He's dead. Lorenzo's expression flickered with something that might have been respect, or perhaps recognition. Then let's make sure his sister doesn't end up the same way. We clear? Crystal clear, sir. As Clara left the study, the small alert device heavy in her apron pocket, she realized she'd just crossed a line she could never uncross. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a player in a very dangerous game. By noon, the mansion was buzzing with quiet tension. Clara noticed it first in the kitchen, where the staff usually gathered for lunch. Maria, the head housekeeper, was whispering to the chef about how strange it was that Mr. De Luca had ended last night's meeting so abruptly. He never cuts those short, Maria said, glancing around nervously. Something must have happened. Clara kept her head down, eating her sandwich in silence, while her heart raced. The paranoia spread faster than she'd expected. In the main hallway, she overheard 2 of Lorenzo's lower-level soldiers talking in hushed tones. Boss seemed off last night, one said. Sent us all home like the house was on fire. My cousin Vinny says maybe the feds are circling, getting ready to move. Nah, feds would have kicked the door in by now, the other replied. This is something else. Something internal. That word, internal, hung in the air like poison. Clara moved through the mansion with her cleaning supplies, invisible as always, but now she was listening differently. Every conversation, every nervous glance, every hushed phone call became data. She'd never realized how much people revealed when they thought the help couldn't hear them. Around 2 p.m., she was polishing the banister near Lorenzo's office when she heard raised voices inside. Through the partially open door, she could see Paulie Marchetti pacing, his thick neck red with frustration. Boss, the men are asking questions, Paulie was saying. They want to know why you shut down the meeting. Some of them are thinking maybe you got cold feet about the North Side move. Let them think whatever they want. Lorenzo's voice was calm, almost amused. A little uncertainty keeps people sharp. Sharp or paranoid? Paulie stopped pacing. Joey Bats is saying maybe someone tipped you off that the plan leaked. Frankie thinks you got a warning from one of your city hall contacts. Hell, even Marco's acting jumpy, and that guy's usually solid as a rock. Marco's always jumpy. That's why he handles the money. Paranoid accountants make fewer mistakes. Clara could hear the frustration in Polly's heavy breath. Lorenzo, I've been with you 8 years. Since you took over from your old man. If something's wrong, you can tell me. There was a long pause. Clara held her breath, staying perfectly still. Polly, you know I trust you, Lorenzo finally said. But right now, I need you to trust me. Keep the men calm. Tell them the North Side operation is still on. We're just refining the approach. Make sure everyone stays focused on their jobs, not on rumors. And if they keep asking, then you remind them what happens to people who question my decisions. The threat in Lorenzo's voice was quiet but unmistakable. Even Polly, his most trusted lieutenant, wasn't being told the truth. Clara felt a strange mixture of fear and something else. Was it pride? Lorenzo was trusting her, a maid, with information he wouldn't share with men who'd been with him for years. After Polly left, looking troubled, Clara quickly resumed her polishing. But she'd only made it a few feet when Lorenzo called out. Clara. A moment. She stepped into the office, closing the door behind her as he gestured. Lorenzo was standing by his desk, looking out the window at the manicured grounds. You're hearing it too, aren't you? He asked without turning around. The whispers. Yes, sir. Everyone's nervous. Good. He turned to face her, and there was something calculating in his expression. Paranoia is useful. It makes people reveal themselves. Watch who's asking the most questions. Watch who's trying to calm everyone down. Watch who's staying quiet when they'd normally speak up. Clara nodded, committing his words to memory. Tony's going to give you a list of names, Lorenzo continued. People who had access to this house over the past month, contractors, delivery people, new staff. I want you to look at it, tell me if anyone stands out. Sometimes the little details matter. A face that doesn't fit. Someone who asks too many questions. Anything unusual. I'll do my best, sir. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled coldly. Marcus just confirmed the apartment is still active. They're still listening, still recording. Which means they have no idea we're onto them. He looked at Clara. Tonight, we give them something worth hearing. Meeting at 8. You'll be there? Yes, sir. As Clara left the office, she nearly collided with Frankie DeLuca, Lorenzo's cousin, and the family's consigliera. Frankie was in his 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his prison-built physique. Careful, sweetheart, Frankie said, steadying her with one hand. But his eyes were studying her face with uncomfortable intensity. You're Clara, right? The new girl? Yes, sir. Lorenzo's been calling you into his office a lot today. It wasn't quite a question, but the implication hung there. Clara felt her palms go sweaty. Just discussing household matters, sir. Some items that need replacing. Frankie's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Household matters, he patted her shoulder, a gesture that felt more threatening than friendly. You're doing good work here, Clara. Keep it up. She watched him walk away, her heart pounding. Had that been innocent conversation, or was Frankie fishing for information? Was he suspicious of her sudden access to Lorenzo, or was he the kind of person who was suspicious of everything? Clara found Tony Greco in the security office, a small room lined with monitors showing different angles of the mansion grounds. He handed her a manila folder without a word. These are all the contractors and service people who've been here in the last 6 weeks, Tony said. Look through it tonight. If any names or faces trigger anything, you let us know. Clara took the folder, feeling its weight. Inside were dozens of names, photos, background checks. Any one of these people could have planted the bugs. Or maybe it was someone not on the list at all, someone who'd slipped through the cracks of even Tony's careful security. One more thing, Tony added, his gray eyes boring into hers. Frankie just asked me why you've been meeting with the boss. I told him Lorenzo's considering promoting you to head housekeeper, that you're being vetted. That satisfy your curiosity? He asked about me. Frankie asks about everything. That's his job, to be suspicious, to protect Lorenzo's interests. Don't take it personally, Tony leaned back in his chair. But do be careful. Frankie's smart. If he thinks something's off, he'll dig until he finds out what. Clara left the security office with a folder hidden under her cleaning supplies. As she walked through the mansion's corridors, she felt eyes on her, real or imagined. She couldn't tell anymore. The house had become a cage of suspicion, and she was trapped inside it with predators who were circling, trying to figure out which of their own had betrayed them. And somewhere in a luxury apartment downtown, someone was listening to every word, making plans of their own. Clara's shift ended at 4 p.m., but she lingered until nearly 5, poring over the contractor files in an empty guest room. Faces blurred together, electricians, plumbers, a window washing crew, the team that had installed new security cameras 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Right around when the bugs appeared. She circled that entry and tucked the folder into her bag, making a mental note to tell Tony about it tonight. The October air was crisp as she stepped out the mansion's service entrance. She wrapped her thin jacket tighter and started down the long driveway toward the bus stop on Ashland Avenue. The DeLuca estate sat in the wealthy Oak Brook suburb, far from her cramped apartment in Pilsen, but the bus route was reliable and the pay was better than anywhere else she'd worked. She'd taken maybe 20 steps when she noticed the black Escalade parked along the tree-lined street, its engine idling. Not unusual in this neighborhood. Lorenzo's men always had vehicles posted around the property. But something about the way it was positioned, nose pointed toward her, made her grip her bag tighter. The small alert device Tony had given her was in her jacket pocket. Her fingers found it, ready. But the Escalade didn't move, and she was probably just being paranoid. She kept walking. At the bus stop, she checked her phone. 15 minutes until the next one arrived. A few other people waited nearby, a nanny with a stroller, an older man reading a newspaper. Normal. Safe. Clara tried to relax, but every survival instinct she'd learned growing up in Southside was screaming at her. "Excuse me, miss." She turned to find a man standing behind her. Mid-30s, clean-cut in a gray business suit, with bland features that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. He smiled pleasantly, like someone about to ask for directions. "You work at the DeLuca house, right?" he asked. "I've seen you coming and going." Every alarm bell in Clara's head went off at once. "I'm sorry, I don't." "It's okay," his smile never wavered. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. Actually, I was hoping we could help each other out." He gestured toward a small bakery across the street. "Could we talk for a minute? I'll buy you a coffee." Clara glanced at the nanny and the old man, both absorbed in their own worlds. The black Escalade was still there, and now she wondered if it was actually Lorenzo's men or something else entirely. "I don't know you," she said carefully. "I'm just waiting for my bus."
Please.
5 minutes. "There's good money in it for you." Something in his tone shifted, became more insistent. "I really think you'll want to hear what I have to say." Against her better judgment, or maybe because she needed to know what this was about, Clara found herself crossing the street with him. Her hand stayed in her pocket, thumb on the alert button. If this went wrong, she'd press it and run. The bakery was warm and smelled like fresh bread. The man bought 2 coffees without asking what she wanted and led her to a corner table, away from the windows. He sat with his back to the wall, like someone who'd been trained to always watch the exits. "My name's not important," he began, sliding one coffee toward her. Clara didn't touch it. "What matters is that I know you work closely with Lorenzo DeLuca. You're in his house every day. You hear things, see things." Clara's mouth went dry. "I'm just a maid. I clean and—" "You were in his private study last night during a very important meeting." The man's pleasant expression never changed, but his eyes had gone cold. "A meeting that ended strangely, suddenly. And this morning, you were called into his office 3 separate times. That's not normal for just a maid." They'd been watching her. Actually watching her. Clara felt violated, exposed. How long had they been tracking her movements? The man reached into his jacket, and Clara's hand tightened on the alert device. But he only pulled out a thick envelope, setting it on the table between them. It bulged with cash, more money than Clara made in a month, maybe two. $5,000, he said quietly. And that's just a down payment. All I need is information. Simple things. What meetings are happening, who attends, what gets discussed. You don't have to do anything dangerous. Just keep your ears open and share what you hear. Clara stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. $5,000 could pay off her mother's medical bills. Could get her into a better apartment, away from the gangs and the dealers on her block. But it would also make her a traitor. And traitors to men like Lorenzo de Luca didn't live long. I can't help you, she said, standing up. I don't know anything, and I wouldn't tell you if I did. The man's hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to hurt. His pleasant mask slipped, revealing something ugly underneath. Sit down, Clara. We're not done talking. Let go of me. You're making a mistake. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more threatening than shouting. We know where you live. We know your mother works at St. Mary's Hospital on night shifts. We know your route home, what bus you take, what time you get there. You really want to make enemies of people with that kind of reach. Clara's blood turned to ice. They'd researched her, mapped her life, identified everyone she cared about. This wasn't just about information. This was a threat to everyone she loved. She pressed the alert button. Nothing happened, no sound, no visible signal. But somewhere, 3 phones were receiving her SOS. I said let go. Clara tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. You've got 24 hours to think about my offer, the man said. Tomorrow, same time, same place. You show up with something useful, you get the money, and everyone stays safe. You don't show up, or you tell DeLuca about this conversation. He smiled coldly. Well, accidents happen, especially to people who work late shifts at hospitals. The bakery door chimed. 2 men walked in, both built like linebackers, both wearing the kind of casual clothing that did nothing to hide their dangerous occupations. Clara recognized one of them, Joey Batts, one of Lorenzo's enforcers. The other was a younger guy she'd seen around the mansion. The man gripping Clara's wrist noticed them too. His eyes widened slightly, and his hand released her. Problem here? Joey Batts asked conversationally, but there was nothing casual about the way he positioned himself between Clara and the stranger. No problem, the man said, standing up smoothly. Just having a friendly conversation with an acquaintance. Didn't look friendly from where I'm standing. Joey's hand rested casually near his waistband, where Clara knew he kept a gun. Lady looks uncomfortable. The stranger glanced between Joey and his partner, calculating odds. Whatever conclusion he reached, it wasn't favorable. He gave Clara one last cold look, a promise that this wasn't over, and walked out of the bakery. Clara's legs felt weak. She sank back into the chair, her hands shaking. You okay, miss? Joey asked, his rough features showing genuine concern. Yes. Thank you. Boss said to keep an eye on you. Good thing we were close. He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. Got a description of the guy. We'll find out who he is. The younger enforcer peered out the window. He's getting into a gray Honda. You want us to follow him? Not yet. Boss will decide. Joey turned back to Clara. Come on. We're taking you home. And from now on, you don't go anywhere without one of us nearby. Boss's orders. As Clara followed them to their car, the envelope still sitting on the bakery table behind her, she realized the game had changed. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was a target. Lorenzo's study felt different this time. Darker, more dangerous. Clara sat in the same chair she'd occupied that morning, but now Joey Batts and his partner stood by the door like sentries. Tony Greco was on his phone, barking orders. Marcus Webb hunched over his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Lorenzo stood by the window, his back to them all, perfectly still. It was the stillness that frightened Clara most, like a predator deciding how to strike. Tell me again, Lorenzo said quietly, not turning around. Every word he said. Clara's voice shook as she repeated the conversation for the 3rd time. The threat about her mother. The envelope of cash. The man's cold smile when he mentioned accidents. When she finished, Lorenzo finally turned. His face was a mask of controlled fury. Marcus, tell me you have something. Working on it, Marcus pulled up surveillance footage from the bakery's exterior camera. Tony had already gotten access to it. Got a clear shot of his face. Running it through our databases now, his computer beeped. Okay, this is interesting. No hits in criminal records, but facial recognition is pulling him from a LinkedIn profile. Name's David Walsh. Lists himself as a security consultant for a firm called Meridian Solutions. Never heard of them, Tony grunted. That's because they don't exist. At least, not legitimately. Marcus pulled up a corporate filing. Shell company, incorporated in Delaware 6 months ago. No physical office, no website, no actual business operations. It's a front. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Connected to the Russians? Give me a minute. Marcus's fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up documents, cross-referencing names. The registered agent for Meridian Solutions is... Okay, buried under 3 layers of holding companies, but... Yes, there it is. Same corporate structure that owns the apartment where the bug signals are going. They're using the same money laundering network. So the Russians are getting bold, Lorenzo said. Not content to just listen. Now they're actively trying to recruit inside my house. They approached the wrong person, Tony said, looking at Clara with something that might have been approval. Lorenzo walked over to Marcus's laptop. Show me everything we have on that apartment. Marcus pulled up a detailed file. Unit 4207, North Michigan Avenue. High-rise luxury building, 42 floors. Very expensive, very secure. The unit's been leased for 3 months under that same shell company. Building management thinks it's being used by a hedge fund executive. Who's actually there? Surveillance suggests 2 people, both male, rotating shifts. They don't leave much, food delivery, minimal movement. Professional setup, Marcus zoomed in on some technical diagrams. The good news is they're using a signal relay on the roof. That means the transmission goes from your bugs to their unit, then out to whoever's actually analyzing the intelligence. We can intercept that secondary signal. Can you trace where it's going after it leaves the apartment? Already did. Marcus looked grim. Multiple endpoints. One in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. That's Russian mob territory. Another in Moscow, routed through about 6 proxy servers. This isn't just the Volkov family. They're sharing intel with people back home. The room fell silent. Clara understood what that meant. This wasn't just a local power struggle anymore. This was international organized crime, with resources and reach far beyond Chicago's streets. Boss, Tony said carefully, we could hit that apartment tonight. Extract those guys, find out who sent them, shut down the whole operation. No, Lorenzo's voice was firm. If we grab them, the Russians will know we're onto them. They'll pull back, regroup, come at us from a different angle. We'll be back to square one, except they'll be more careful next time. So, what do we do? Lorenzo turned to Marcus. Can you monitor their apartment without them knowing? See who comes and goes, what they're transmitting, everything. Already on it. I've got a team setting up counter-surveillance right now. By tonight, we'll have eyes and ears on the people who have eyes and ears on you. A cold smile crossed Lorenzo's face. Beautiful. So they're listening to us, and we're listening to them. That means we control the flow of information in both directions. Clara spoke up hesitantly. The man, Walsh, he said I have 24 hours. He wants me to meet him tomorrow with information. And you will, Lorenzo said, making her eyes widen. But not the information he wants. You're going to feed him exactly what we want the Russians to hear. Boss, that's risky, Tony protested. They threatened her mother. They know where she lives. If they think she's playing them. Which is why she'll have protection 24/7. And why Walsh will never get within 100 yards of her again, without us knowing about it. Lorenzo looked at Clara. Unless you want out. This isn't what you signed up for when you took a job cleaning my house. I wouldn't blame you if you walked away. Clara thought about the man's cold eyes, his threats against her mother. She thought about running, hiding, maybe leaving Chicago altogether. But she also knew men like Walsh and the people he worked for. They didn't forget. They didn't forgive. Running would just make her a target somewhere else. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Joey and Marco will shadow you everywhere outside this house. Inside, you're safe. We're doing another sweep tonight to make sure there are no more surprises. Tomorrow, when Walsh approaches you, you tell him you'll cooperate. You give him small details, nothing critical. We'll script it out. Won't he know it's fake? Not if we mix truth with lies. Give him real names of people in my organization, ones who don't matter or ones I want him to focus on. Give him a real meeting time and place, but not what we'll actually discuss there. Make him think he's getting valuable intel when he's really just chasing shadows." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Boss, I've got live feed from the apartment. Want to see who we're dealing with?" Lorenzo moved behind Marcus's chair. Clara joined them, peering at the screen. The image showed a modern apartment interior, expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the Chicago skyline. Two men were visible. One sat at a bank of computer equipment, wearing headphones. The other stood by the window, speaking on a phone in what Clara assumed was Russian. "That one on the phone is Dmitry Volkov," Tony said, pointing. "Alexei Volkov's nephew. I've seen his file. Ex-Russian military intelligence, GRU. Very dangerous." "And the one at the computers?" Lorenzo asked. "Don't know yet. But look at that setup," Marcus zoomed in. "Military-grade surveillance equipment, encrypted communications, probably a direct feed to their bosses. This is a serious operation." Lorenzo watched the screen, his expression unreadable. "Then we'll give them a serious performance. Marcus, I want to know everything about those two, their routines, their vulnerabilities, who they report to. Tony, coordinate protection for Clara and her mother. Nobody touches them. And get me a full roster of everyone who was in my house when those bugs were planted. Someone helped them, and I want to know who." "What about Walsh?" Joey asked. "You want us to pick him up?" "Not yet. Let him think he's still in control. Let him report back that he made contact with my maid, that she's scared, that she might crack. Let the Russians feel confident." Lorenzo's smile was razor-thin. "Overconfidence makes people sloppy. And when they get sloppy, we'll be ready." As the meeting broke up, Clara realized she was now part of something far bigger and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was bait. 2 days later, Lorenzo called the meeting. Clara arrived at the study at 8 p.m. sharp, carrying the same silver tray as before, her hands steadier than she expected. Joey, Bats, and Marco had been her constant shadows, one always within sight, the other watching from a distance. She'd even had dinner with her mother the previous night, though she hadn't told her why two large men suddenly sat at a nearby table the entire time. Walsh hadn't approached her again. According to Tony, he was waiting for her to reach out first, testing to see if she'd crack under pressure. Tonight, she'd give him something to report. The same 6 men sat around Lorenzo's table: Polly, Frankie, Marco the accountant, 2 enforcers named Sal and Big Tommy, and Johnny Russo, who handled the South Side operations. They looked tense, confused about why they'd been summoned for another late-night meeting after the strange one earlier in the week. Clara slipped in quietly, moving along the wall to the sidebar where the drinks waited. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, relaxed and confident, shuffling through papers. He didn't acknowledge her presence. But she knew, and he knew, this was all theater. "Gentlemen," Lorenzo began, his voice carrying the same authority as always, "I appreciate you coming on short notice. We have an opportunity that can't wait." Polly leaned forward. "What kind of opportunity, boss?" "The kind that changes everything." Lorenzo spread a map across the table, a detailed layout of the Chicago waterfront. His finger tapped a location marked in red. Dock 47, down in the industrial port. 3 nights from now, a container ship arrives from overseas. Officially, it's carrying automotive parts. Unofficially, he smiled, it's carrying enough military-grade weapons to arm a small country. The men exchanged glances. Clara refilled glasses with practiced silence, her heart pounding. Every word Lorenzo spoke was a lie, but it sounded completely convincing. Who's the seller? Frankie asked, his sharp eyes narrowed with suspicion. Eastern European connections. Former military suppliers who've gone private. Lorenzo pulled out photographs. Fake ones, Clara assumed, prepared by Marcus's team. AK-47s, RPGs, Semtex explosives, night vision equipment. Everything still in factory packaging. The shipment was supposed to go to a buyer in Detroit, but they backed out last minute. Now it's up for grabs, and we've got first crack at it. What's the price tag? Marco the accountant asked, already calculating in his head. $3 million for the entire shipment. Market value is triple that. Lorenzo, let that sink in. We buy it. We control the weapons supply for the entire Midwest. Every gang, every crew, every organization that needs hardware comes through us. It's not just profit, it's power. Big Tommy grunted. Sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? The catch is timing and security, Lorenzo said. The ship docks at 2 a.m. We have a 4-hour window to offload the containers and move them to a secure warehouse. That means we need at least 20 men for trucks and enough firepower to handle any complications. What kind of complications?
Sal asked.
The feds could be watching the port. Rival families might have gotten wind of the shipment. And the sellers want their money in cash up front. Before we even see the merchandise, Lorenzo's tone was measured, laying out risks like a man who'd thought through every angle. It's risky, but the payoff is worth it. Clara moved to refill Lorenzo's glass. As she leaned in, she could see the slight tension in his jaw, the only sign that he was performing rather than planning. To everyone else, he looked completely genuine. Frankie spoke up, his voice cautious. Boss, with all due respect, this feels rushed. $3 million is a lot of cash to drop on a deal we just heard about. How solid is your source? Solid enough that I'm putting my own money in. Lorenzo met Frankie's eyes steadily. But I'm not forcing anyone. If you're uncomfortable, say so now. I'll find people who aren't. The challenge hung in the air. Clara watched the men's faces, the mixture of greed, fear, and pride. They didn't want to look weak in front of their boss or each other. I'm in, Polly said immediately. You need my crew at the docks. They'll be there. Me too, Big Tommy added. My guys know how to handle cargo operations. One by one, they committed. Even Frankie, though Clara noticed he still looked uncertain. Maybe he sensed something was off, or maybe he was just naturally suspicious. Either way, he couldn't back out without looking disloyal. Lorenzo nodded, satisfied. Good. Polly, you coordinate the manpower. Marco, get $3 million in cash ready, small bills, mixed denominations. Sal, you and Tommy scout the warehouse on South Racine Avenue. I want it secured by tomorrow night. What about the Russians? Johnny Russo asked. They've been sniffing around our operations lately. What if they hear about this and try to muscle in? Lorenzo's expression hardened, and Clara wondered if this part was real or still part of the act. Let them try. We'll have enough security at Dock 47 to handle whatever comes. Besides, the Russians are too busy with their own problems to worry about our business. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, Lorenzo doling out assignments and answering questions with a kind of detail that made the whole operation sound legitimate. Clara listened to it all, pouring drinks and staying invisible, while somewhere across the city, 2 Russians in a luxury apartment were recording every word. When the men finally filed out, Clara lingered by the sidebar, organizing glasses that didn't need organizing. Lorenzo waited until the door clicked shut, then let out a long breath. How'd I do? He asked quietly. I believed it, Clara admitted. If I didn't know better, I'd think we were actually stealing weapons in 3 days. Good. Lorenzo poured himself a real drink this time. Because if you believed it, they'll believe it too. He walked to the wall panel where the bug was hidden, still transmitting faithfully. You hear that, you Russian bastards? I just handed you the biggest score of the year. Let's see if you can resist. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from Marcus that just said, they're taking the bait. Lorenzo saw her face and smiled coldly. And now we wait. They'll either report this up the chain and try to intercept the shipment themselves, or they'll tip off the feds and try to get me arrested. Either way, they'll show their hand. What if they do both? Then we'll know just how desperate they are. Lorenzo finished his drink. Get some rest, Clara. Next few days are going to be interesting. And by interesting, I mean potentially lethal. As Clara left the study, she passed Frankie in the hallway. He was on his phone, speaking quietly in Italian. When he saw her, he ended the call abruptly. Working late again, Clara? He asked. Just cleaning up from the meeting, Mr. DeLuca. His eyes studied her face, searching for something. That was quite a meeting. Big plans. I wouldn't know, sir. I just served the drinks. Right, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just serve the drinks. Have a good night, Clara. She walked away feeling his gaze on her back, and couldn't shake the feeling that Frankie DeLuca suspected something, though whether he suspected her, Lorenzo, or the whole operation, she couldn't tell. The game was getting more dangerous by the hour. The call came at 3 a.m. Clara jerked awake in her small apartment, fumbling for her phone in the darkness. Joey Batts was stationed outside her building, and Marco was parked down the street. Lorenzo's protection detail never slept. But the call wasn't from them. Clara, it's Marcus. You need to see this. I'm sending a car. 20 minutes later, still in her jeans and an old sweatshirt, Clara was being escorted into a nondescript office building in the Loop. Marcus had set up a temporary surveillance hub on the third floor, a room packed with computer equipment, monitors, and 3 exhausted-looking tech specialists. Lorenzo was already there, standing in front of a wall of screens, coffee in hand. Tony Greco sat at one of the workstations, coordinating with field teams on an encrypted radio. The room hummed with urgent energy. Show her, Lorenzo said without looking away from the monitors. Marcus pulled up footage on the main screen. This is from 4 hours ago, right after your meeting ended. Watch the apartment. Clara saw the now familiar interior of Unit 4207. Dmitry Volkov was pacing frantically, shouting into his phone in Russian. The other man, Marcus had identified him as Pavel Sokolov, another GRU veteran, was at his computer station, typing furiously. What are they saying? Clara asked. Marcus pulled up a translation on a second screen. Dmitry's talking to his uncle Alexei, head of the Volkov family. He's telling him about the weapons shipment at Dock 47. Listen to this part. He played the audio with subtitles. 3 million in weapons, uncle. Military grade. If DeLuca gets this shipment, he'll control the entire regional market. We have to move now. Lorenzo's jaw tightened as he watched his enemies discuss his fabricated plan. And here's where it gets interesting, Marcus continued, pulling up new footage. 2 hours ago, Dmitry left the apartment for the first time in 3 days. We followed him. The screen showed Dmitry getting into a black Mercedes, then cut to tracking footage following the car through Chicago's streets. It stopped at a warehouse in Brighton Beach, a known Russian mob stronghold. He's meeting with a full Volkov crew, Tony interjected. We've got surveillance on the warehouse. Counted at least 20 guys going in over the past hour. They're planning something big. Marcus pulled up another screen, heat signature imaging from outside the warehouse. See these thermal patterns? They're moving weapons, loading vehicles. This isn't a small operation. They're mobilizing for a major hit. Clara felt her stomach drop. They're actually going to try to steal the shipment. Better than that, Lorenzo said, and there was dark satisfaction in his voice. They're going all in. Every available man, every resource. They think they're about to cripple my operation and score the biggest weapons cache in years. He turned to Marcus. What else? Marcus pulled up email intercepts. Pavel sent encrypted messages to contacts in Moscow and New York. He's calling in favors, asking for reinforcement. The Chicago Volkovs are treating this like a declaration of war. They're not just planning to steal the shipment. They're planning to ambush your men at the docks and send a message. How many are we looking at? Tony asked. Based on chatter and movements, I'd estimate 30 to 40 combatants. Maybe more. They're bringing serious firepower. Marcus zoomed in on surveillance photos showing men loading rifles and tactical gear into SUVs. Lorenzo set down his coffee cup, his expression calculating. They're overcommitting. That's exactly what we want. If they pull this many men for the docks, they leave everything else exposed. Their gambling operations, their protection rackets, their real weapons caches. So, we hit them while they're hitting us? Clara asked, starting to understand the strategy. We hit them while they're hitting nothing, Lorenzo corrected. They show up to Dock 47 expecting my men and a weapons shipment. Instead, they find FBI. Tony finished with a grim smile. I've been coordinating with our federal contact. He's very interested in 40 armed Russian mobsters converging on a Chicago dock in the middle of the night, especially when we provide him with evidence of their criminal organization. Clara's eyes widened. You're setting them up for a federal bust. Mutually assured destruction has a nice ring to it, Lorenzo said. The Volkovs get arrested with enough weapons charges to put them away for decades. And since we're the ones who tipped off the FBI, we look like concerned citizens helping law enforcement. The feds get a major bust, we eliminate our competition, and our hands stay clean. Marcus pulled up another screen showing text message intercepts. It gets better. The Volkovs are so confident they're already planning the victory celebration. Pavel texted someone in Moscow saying, DeLuca's finished. Chicago is ours by Sunday. Sunday is 3 days away, Tony noted. They think they've already won. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed the screen to Tony. That's our FBI contact. He's assembling a tactical team. SWAT, DEA, ATF. They're making it a multi-agency operation. The Volkovs are going to be walking into the biggest law enforcement trap in Chicago history. Clara watched the monitors, seeing the Russians preparing for their assault, completely unaware they were being watched at every step. It was brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. What about Frankie? She asked suddenly, remembering the suspicion in his eyes. He seemed doubtful at the meeting. What if he warns them somehow? Lorenzo's expression darkened. Frankie's been making unauthorized calls. Tony's been monitoring them. Haven't you, Tony? Tony pulled up phone records. 3 calls to unlisted numbers in the past 2 days. Working on tracing them now, but the timing is suspicious. Right after your meetings, every time. The room went quiet. The implications were staggering. Lorenzo's own cousin, his consigliera, might be the mole. Could be coincidence, Marcus said carefully. Could be he's just paranoid and checking his own sources. Or he's the one who helped them plant the bugs in the first place, Lorenzo said flatly. Family or not, if Frankie's working with the Russians, he goes down with them. Clara felt a chill. She'd watched enough mob movies to know what goes down meant in Lorenzo's world. Boss, one of Marcus's tech guys called out. You need to see this. The Russians just sent another message. Marcus pulled it up on the main screen. It was encrypted, but they'd cracked the code days ago. The message was short, in English this time. Dock 47. Day after tomorrow, 2 a.m. Bring everything. This is our moment. They've set the date, Marcus said. Same timeline as your fake meeting mentioned. They're completely bought in. Lorenzo stared at the message, then at the surveillance footage, showing the Russians preparing for war. His enemies were about to walk into a trap of their own making, triggered by a maid's whisper and a carefully constructed lie. Gentlemen, Lorenzo said quietly, prepare for endgame. Day after tomorrow, we end the Volkov problem permanently. Clara looked at the screens, at the Russians arming themselves, at the FBI coordinating their tactical teams, at the web of surveillance and counter-surveillance that had turned Lorenzo's mansion into the center of a shadow war. She'd asked her boss to shut up 1 week ago. Now, that single whispered warning was about to bring down an entire criminal empire. The night air at Dock 47 was thick with fog rolling off Lake Michigan. Clara watched from inside a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away, her eyes fixed on multiple monitor screens showing different angles of the industrial waterfront. Marcus sat beside her, coordinating communications. Tony and Joey were in the field with Lorenzo's hand-picked team. Lorenzo himself stood outside the van, speaking quietly into his radio. He'd refused to hide while his plan unfolded. All units sound off, Marcus said into his headset. Responses crackled through the speakers. FBI teams positioned in shipping containers. Lorenzo's men stationed on rooftops with night vision scopes. Undercover officers posing as dock workers. Everyone was in place. Clara checked her watch. 1:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the Russians arrived expecting a weapons shipment that didn't exist. Movement on the north approach. A voice reported through the radio. 3 vehicles, SUVs, heading toward the dock entrance. Marcus pulled up thermal imaging. Clara watched as heat signatures showed multiple armed figures in the vehicles. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "That's just the advance team," Marcus murmured. "The main force will come from the south, trying to box in whoever's here." He was right. 2 minutes later, more vehicles appeared on the southern cameras, a convoy of 5 SUVs and a panel truck moving in formation like a military operation. "Jesus," Clara whispered. "How many did they bring?" "Looks like 35, maybe 40 combatants," Marcus said, counting heat signatures. "They committed everything to this." Lorenzo's voice came through the radio, calm and steady. "FBI team leader, confirm you're seeing this." "Confirmed." A new voice responded, Special Agent Sarah Chin, the FBI contact Tony had been coordinating with. "We count 38 armed individuals converging on a commercial dock at 2 a.m. with no legitimate business purpose. That's enough for us. All teams, prepare to move on my signal." The Russians' vehicles stopped at predetermined positions around the dock. Men poured out, weapons visible even in the darkness, rifles, shotguns, tactical gear. They moved with military precision, establishing a perimeter. Dmitry Volkov was visible in the center, barking orders in Russian. Even through the grainy surveillance footage, Clara could see his confidence. He thought he was about to win. "They're in position," Marcus reported. "Completely exposed. FBI, you're clear to engage," Lorenzo said into his radio. "All units, go, go, go." The dock exploded into chaos. Floodlights blazed from every direction, turning night into harsh daylight. FBI agents poured from shipping containers, from warehouses, from concealed positions everywhere. Police vehicles blocked every exit route. Federal agents. "Drop your weapons." Down on the ground. The Russians froze, caught in the open with nowhere to run. A few raised their weapons, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Clara watched as Dmitry's expression transformed from confidence to horror as he realized they'd been set up. Within 90 seconds, it was over. Not a shot fired. The Russians dropped their weapons and hit the ground as FBI agents swarmed over them, zip ties and handcuffs appearing on wrists. "Target secured," Agent Chen's voice came through. 38 suspects in custody, multiple weapons charges, organized crime statutes. "This is going to be a career-making bust." "Nice work, Mr. DeLuca." Lorenzo allowed himself a small smile. "Always happy to help law enforcement, Agent Chen." But Marcus was already switching feeds. "Boss, Team 2 is moving on the apartment now." Clara's attention shifted to new screens showing the interior hallway of the luxury high-rise. A tactical team, Lorenzo's men, not FBI, approached Unit 4207 with military precision. They had cameras mounted on their helmets, giving Marcus multiple viewpoints. Breaching in 3,
2,
1 inch. The door exploded inward. The team flooded into the apartment, weapons drawn. Pavel Sokolov barely had time to look up from his computer station before he was tackled to the ground. The apartment was empty otherwise. Dmitry had taken everyone to the docks.
Clear.
1 suspect secured. Tony's voice reported from inside. "Don't touch the equipment yet," Marcus said urgently. "I need to see what we're dealing with." 2 of Marcus's tech specialists entered the apartment, already pulling out scanning devices. Clara watched as they examined the bank of computers and surveillance equipment. "Boss, you need to see this," one of them said, his voice tight. The helmet camera zoomed in on the computer screens. Clara's breath caught. The displays showed not just feeds from Lorenzo's mansion, they showed surveillance on dozens of locations. Other businesses, other homes, other families. "They've been running a whole network," Marcus said, his fingers flying over his keyboard as he remotely accessed the captured computers. "Jesus Christ. They've got bugs in the Marchetti family operations, the Russo crew territory, even some of our police contacts' offices. This wasn't just about Lorenzo. They've been surveilling half the Chicago underworld. How long? Lorenzo asked sharply. Marcus scrolled through files, his face growing paler. Months. Maybe a year. They've got recordings of meetings, phone calls, private conversations. This is an intelligence gold mine. Download everything, Lorenzo ordered. Every file, every recording, every contact. Already on it. But boss, there's more. Marcus pulled up a file directory. They've been selling information. Look at these transaction records. They've been providing intel to multiple buyers, the Russos, some crew in Detroit, even some independent operators. They weren't just spying for themselves, they built a whole intelligence brokerage operation. Clara felt sick. The Volkovs had turned surveillance into a business, selling secrets that got people killed or arrested. Secure all the evidence, Lorenzo said. Hard drives, phones, everything. I want to know everyone who bought from them and everyone they had under surveillance. Team leader, we've got something else. Tony's voice crackled through. There's a safe in the bedroom closet. Look serious. The helmet camera showed Tony kneeling by a floor safe. He placed a small device on it, something that looked like an advanced lockpick, and within seconds, the safe clicked open. Tony pulled out the contents, stacks of cash, passports, USB drives, and a leather journal. He flipped it open, scanning the pages. Boss, this is a ledger. Names, dates, payments received. It's a complete record of their operation, he paused. And there's a name in here you need to know about. Someone they listed as primary asset, DeLuca Organization. Lorenzo's expression went stone cold. Read it. Tony's voice was grim. Internal source, recruited 14 months ago. Code name, Consiglio. The surveillance band went silent. Clara's stomach dropped as she understood what that meant.
Consiglio.
Italian for counsel or advisor. Frankie, Lorenzo's cousin. His consigliera. Son of a bitch, Lorenzo breathed. It was him all along. Marcus pulled up more files. Now searching specifically for anything related to Consiglio, the evidence poured onto the screens. Payments totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Detailed reports Frankie had provided about Lorenzo's operations. Even copies of texts where Frankie gave the Russians access codes and schedules. He helped them plant the bugs, Marcus said, reading through the files. He's the one who hired the contractor who installed them. He gave them your security protocols, your daily routines, your weaknesses. He's been selling you out for over a year. Clara remembered Frankie's suspicious looks, his probing questions, his phone calls after meetings. All of it made sense now. Lorenzo's face was a mask of controlled fury. Where is he now? Tracking his phone. He's at his house in Naperville, Tony reported. Keep him there. I'm on my way. Lorenzo started toward his car, then stopped and looked back at Clara. You did good. Thank you. What happens now? She asked quietly. Lorenzo's expression was dark as a grave. Now I have a conversation with my cousin about the cost of betrayal. Frankie DeLuca's house in Naperville was a sprawling colonial with a manicured lawn, bought and paid for with blood money, both Lorenzo's and the Russians. When Lorenzo's convoy pulled up at 3:30 a.m., the lights were still on inside. Clara had insisted on coming, though Lorenzo had tried to talk her out of it. You started this, he'd finally said. You deserve to see how it ends. Now she sat in the car with Joey Batts while Lorenzo, Tony, and 4 other men approached the front door. They didn't knock. Tony used a key. Lorenzo had keys to all his inner circle's homes, a fact that suddenly seemed less like trust and more like insurance. They found Frankie in his study, whiskey in hand, staring at his phone. He looked up as they entered, and Clara saw no surprise in his face. Only resignation. I wondered how long it would take, Frankie said quietly. Lorenzo closed the door behind them. When he spoke, his voice was colder than Clara had ever heard it. 14 months, Frankie. 14 months, you've been selling me to the Russians. My own cousin. My father's blood. Frankie took a long drink. Your father was a dinosaur who couldn't see the future. You're just like him. Too proud. Too traditional. The Russians are the future, Lorenzo. They have connections, resources, reach you can't match. I tried to tell you to make peace with them, to share territory, but you wouldn't listen. So you decided to destroy me instead. I decided to survive. Frankie set down his glass. You think the Volkovs approached me? I approached them. I saw which way the wind was blowing. In 5 years, they'll control Chicago, and I was going to be on the winning side. Tony stepped forward, his hand near his weapon, but Lorenzo held up a hand to stop him. Tell me how you did it, Lorenzo said. All of it. You owe me that much. Frankie laughed bitterly. What does it matter now? You've already won. The Volkovs are in FBI custody. Their operation is finished. I want names. Everyone involved. Every contractor you hired. Every person you compromised. For a moment, Frankie looked like he might refuse. Then something in Lorenzo's expression, something dark and final, made him reconsider. The electrician was named Ray Hutchins, Frankie began. He's done work for the family before. Legitimate guy, but he had gambling debts. I told him the Russians would clear his markers, 50 grand worth, if he installed some security equipment during a routine maintenance call. He thought it was just corporate espionage, nothing criminal. He placed the first bug in your study 3 months ago. 3 months, Lorenzo repeated. But the tech was only 3 weeks old. They upgraded. The first bugs were basic. The Russians wanted to test if you'd notice. When you didn't, they had Hutchins install the military-grade equipment. I gave him access codes, schedules of when you'd be out of the house. Made it easy. Clara felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated, methodical destruction of family trust. Who else? Tony demanded. The car bug, that was me. I installed it myself last month when Lorenzo was in New York. Took me 10 minutes. Frankie's voice was flat, matter of fact. The phone tap was another contractor, a telecom guy named Eddie Garcia. Same deal. Debts, desperation, payoff. He thought he was helping corporate espionage too. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, typing notes. What about the surveillance apartment? Who else knew about it? Just the Volkovs and their tech team. I never went there. They paid me through cryptocurrency, untraceable, or so I thought. He glared at Marcus, who just entered the room. Your tech guy is better than I gave him credit for. What did you tell them? Lorenzo asked. What information did you sell? Everything. Frankie met Lorenzo's eyes with defiance. Meeting schedules, business deals, police contacts, shipment routes, rival family negotiations. Every move you made, they knew about it before you finished making it. That's how they've been avoiding your hits, why their operations always seemed one step ahead. And the money? What did they pay you? $250,000 over 14 months. Plus promises of territory when they took over. A seat at their table, Frankie poured another whiskey. More than you ever offered me, cousin. I did the real work while you got the glory. Your father's favorite nephew, the chosen heir. Where did that leave me? Alive, Lorenzo said simply. That's where it left you. And you threw it away. The room fell silent. Clara watched Lorenzo's face, seeing the war between family loyalty and cold pragmatism. She wondered which would win. Tony, Lorenzo said finally. Take Frankie to the warehouse on Division Street. Keep him there until I decide what to do with him. As Tony's men moved to escort Frankie out, Lorenzo's cousin looked back one more time. You know what you have to do, Lorenzo. Family or not, I'm a traitor. Your men will expect justice. Don't tell me my business, Frankie. You lost that right when you sold me out. After they left, Clara found Lorenzo standing by the window, staring at nothing. Are you okay? She asked quietly. My cousin. My father's blood. I trusted him with everything. Lorenzo's voice was hollow. He put bugs in my house. Sold my secrets. Would have gotten me killed or imprisoned if not for you. What will you do with him? Lorenzo didn't answer directly. Ray Hutchins, the electrician. Tony's already picked him up. He's cooperating fully, terrified he'll be charged as an accomplice. Eddie Garcia, the telecom guy, is in the wind. We'll find him. And every other contractor, delivery person, or service worker who had access to my house over the past year is being vetted again. If they so much as looked at the Russians, they're done. And Frankie. Lorenzo turned to face her. The old rules say family betrayal is punishable by death. My father would have killed him without hesitation. He paused. But I'm not my father. I'll have to think about what justice looks like here. Clara understood what he wasn't saying, that showing mercy might look like weakness, but killing family might cost him something he couldn't get back. The ledger from the apartment, Lorenzo continued, changing the subject. It has names of everyone who bought information from the Volkovs. 17 different buyers, rival families, corrupt officials, even a few journalists. Marcus is tracing them all. By tomorrow, we'll know everyone who's been using Russian intelligence against us. What will you do with that information? A cold smile crossed Lorenzo's face. That depends on who they are and what they know. Some will pay for their disloyalty. Others might be useful allies if properly motivated. His phone buzzed. He checked it, then showed Clara the screen. It was a news alert. Massive FBI raid on organized crime ring. 38 arrested at Chicago docks. It's already hitting the news, Lorenzo said. By morning, everyone in Chicago will know the Volkov operation is finished. And the best part? The FBI is calling it a successful interagency investigation with help from confidential informants. My name doesn't appear anywhere. Clara felt the weight of everything that had happened. The whisper that started it all. The bugs, the counter-surveillance, the elaborate trap. A week ago, she was just a maid trying to pay rent. Now she stood in a trader's house at 4 a.m, watching a mafia boss consolidate power through calculated deception.
You should go home, Lorenzo said.
Get some rest. This is over for you. But Clara knew that wasn't true. She'd seen too much, knew too much. She was part of Lorenzo's world now, whether she wanted to be or not. Is it really over? She asked. Lorenzo looked at her with something like respect. The war with the Russians?
Yes.
But there's always another fight coming. That's the business we're in. You're under my protection now, Clara. For life. That's not negotiable. His tone softened slightly. But it also means opportunity if you want it. You've proven you're smart, loyal, and brave. Those qualities are rare. Clara thought about her small apartment, her mother's medical bills, her dead brother's warnings about the life he'd chosen. She thought about how one whispered warning had changed everything. Let me think about it, she said finally. Lorenzo nodded. Fair enough. Now, let's get you home. The purge began at dawn. Clara arrived at the mansion at 6 a.m. to find half the staff gone. Maria, the head housekeeper who'd worked for the De Lucas for 15 years, was packing her belongings into cardboard boxes, tears streaming down her face. 2 of Tony's security men stood by the door, watching to make sure she took nothing that didn't belong to her. I didn't do anything wrong, Maria sobbed as Clara passed. I've been loyal. I've never. Your nephew works for the Volkovs, Tony said flatly. You failed to disclose that relationship when you were hired. That's a security breach. He's just a kid. He runs errands for them, nothing serious. Not our problem. You're done. Out. Clara kept walking, her stomach churning. Maria had always been kind to her, teaching her which rooms Lorenzo preferred cleaned first, which glasses to use for which drinks. Now she was being erased from the De Luca operation like she'd never existed. In the kitchen, the chef was gone too, replaced by someone Clara didn't recognize, a stern-looking woman already preparing breakfast with military precision. 2 of the groundskeepers were clearing out their equipment shed under Tony's watchful eye. Clara found Lorenzo in his study, going through personnel files with Marco the accountant. The desk was covered with folders, each one representing someone whose loyalty was being questioned. The landscaping service. They've been doing our grounds for 3 years, Marco was saying. But their company did work at the Volkov estate in Brighton Beach last summer. That's too close for comfort. Replace them, Lorenzo said without hesitation. Get recommendations from the Marchetti family. They've got people. What about Sal Benedetto? He's been driving for us for. His brother-in-law is Eddie Garcia, The telecom guy who planted the phone tap. Lorenzo's voice was ice. Sal claims he didn't know, but I don't believe in coincidences. He's out. Marco made a note. That's 18 people so far, boss. We're going to be short-staffed. Then hire new people. Better short-staffed than compromised. Lorenzo looked up and saw Clara. Give us a minute, Marco. After the accountant left, Lorenzo gestured for Clara to sit. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. She doubted he'd slept at all. Ray Hutchins, the electrician, gave us a list of everyone he'd worked with who might have been approached by the Russians, Lorenzo said. 7 contractors, 3 delivery services, and 2 security consultants. We're vetting all of them. The ones who can't be cleared are being cut loose. That's a lot of people, Clara said quietly. It has to be done. The Volkovs infiltrated my operation at every level. They knew things they shouldn't have known, not just from Frankie's reports, but from people who saw things, heard things, and got paid to share it. He pulled out a list. Marcus found payment records. 12 people on my payroll took money from the Russians at some point over the past year. Some didn't even know they were working for them. They thought it was industrial espionage, competitive intelligence gathering. Doesn't matter. They're gone. What about the ones who refuse? Clara asked. The ones the Russians approached, but said no. Lorenzo's expression softened slightly. Those are the ones I'm keeping. And rewarding. Loyalty in the face of temptation is rare. He paused. Like you. They offered you $5,000 and threatened your mother, and you still said no. That kind of integrity can't be bought. Over the next 3 days, Clara watched the transformation of the DeLuca operation unfold with quiet efficiency. It wasn't dramatic. No violence, no bodies, no public spectacle. People simply disappeared from the organization, replaced by new faces who'd been thoroughly vetted. The security system was completely overhauled. Marcus's team swept every room, every vehicle, every phone line, installing new encrypted communications and advanced detection equipment. The mansion staff was required to go through metal detectors and random searches. New protocols required authorization codes for entry to sensitive areas. Tony implemented a need-to-know policy. Information was compartmentalized, so no single person except Lorenzo knew the complete picture of any operation. Meeting locations changed randomly. Code words replaced names in phone conversations. The suppliers changed too. The liquor distributor who'd served the mansion for a decade was replaced when background checks revealed his warehouse manager had done time with a known Volkov associate. The produce vendor was swapped out. Even the company that serviced Lorenzo's cars was changed to one with no Russian connections whatsoever. Clara heard through the remaining staff that 3 of Lorenzo's soldiers had been demoted or reassigned. They hadn't done anything overtly disloyal, but they'd been careless, talking too freely in public, showing up to meetings at predictable times, creating patterns the Russians could exploit. Carelessness is just slow betrayal, Tony told his security team during a briefing Clara overheard. If you can't follow protocols, you can't work here. No exceptions. On the 4th day, Clara was cleaning the second-floor library when she overheard Lorenzo on the phone in his office. No, the contractors won't talk. They don't know enough to matter, and they're more scared of prison than anything else. A pause. Frankie?
He's
being handled. Family business stays in the family. Another pause. Yes, I'm sure. The organization is cleaner now than it's been in years. The Volkov network is destroyed, and everyone who compromised us is gone. We're starting fresh. That afternoon, Clara passed Polly Marchetti in the hallway. Lorenzo's right-hand man looked older, somehow more serious. Boss told me what you did, Polly said quietly. Told me how you heard the bug, how you warned him. That took guts, kid. I just did what seemed right, Clara said. Most people don't. Most people look the other way, keep their heads down, protect themselves first. Polly's expression was respectful. You protected him first. That matters. As he walked away, Clara realized the entire dynamic of the organization had shifted. Before, she'd been invisible, the help, the furniture, the person no one noticed. Now, people nodded to her in hallways. Men like Polly and Tony treated her with respect. Even Lorenzo's body language had changed around her. He spoke to her directly, sought her observations, trusted her presence in sensitive moments. That evening, as Clara was preparing to leave, Tony stopped her at the door. "Boss wants to see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., in his study." "Wear something nice." He saw her confused expression and smiled slightly. "It's good news, Clara. Trust me." That night, lying in her small apartment with Joey Bats stationed outside as always, Clara thought about everything that had changed. A whispered warning had exposed a traitor, destroyed a rival organization, and purged corruption from Lorenzo's empire. But it had also cost people their jobs, their livelihoods. Maria was gone. Sal was gone. A dozen others were gone, their families impacted by decisions made in the name of security. Was it worth it? Clara didn't know. In Lorenzo's world, loyalty was everything, and betrayal was unforgivable. There was no middle ground, no room for mistakes or innocent connections. She'd saved Lorenzo's life, but she'd also helped him consolidate power in a way that made him more dangerous than ever. Tomorrow, she'd find out what that meant for her future. 3 weeks later, Clara found herself in Lorenzo's study again, polishing the same mahogany table where everything had begun. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, making the wood grain glow. The wall panel where the bug had been hidden was now freshly painted, the molding replaced. No trace remained of what had been there. The mansion felt different now, cleaner somehow, though that had nothing to do with her work. The new staff moved with professional efficiency. The security was tighter. There were no more whispered rumors or nervous glances. Lorenzo's organization had been purged of its rot, and what remained was stronger, leaner, more disciplined. Clara heard footsteps and looked up to see Lorenzo entering. He wore a charcoal suit, crisp and perfectly tailored, but his expression was softer than usual. "Leave that for a moment," he said. "Sit down, Clara." She set down the polishing cloth and took the chair across from his desk, the same one she'd sat in when this had all started. Her heart beat faster, remembering Tony's words about wearing something nice. She'd chosen a simple navy dress, the nicest thing she owned. Lorenzo sat on the edge of his desk rather than behind it, making the moment feel less formal, more personal. "One word changed everything," he said quietly. "When you whispered 'shut up' in my ear that night, you saved my life. You exposed a traitor, destroyed my enemies, and helped me rebuild this organization into something better. Do you understand what that means?" I just did what seemed right," Clara said. "Most people don't. Most people hear something wrong and convince themselves it's not their problem." Lorenzo pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. "I've been thinking about what to do with you, Clara Reyes. You're not just a maid anymore, we both know that. But you're also not a soldier, not muscle, not someone who belongs in the violent side of my business." Clara's mouth felt dry. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a choice." He opened the folder, revealing papers. Option 1. I give you 6 months severance pay, $50,000, and excellent references for any legitimate job you want. You walk away from all of this, start fresh somewhere else. I'll make sure you and your mother stay protected for the next 5 years, just to be safe. You owe me nothing, Clara. You've already paid any debt. Clara stared at the papers. $50,000. A clean break. A normal life. "What's option 2? She asked. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. "Option 2 is you stay. Not as a maid, as something more important. My household manager and personal assistant. You'd coordinate the staff, manage the household operations, be present at certain meetings to observe and advise. You'd be part of my inner circle, with the pay, protection, and respect that comes with it." "Why me?" "Because you see things others miss. Because you're smart enough to know when to speak and when to stay silent. Because in a world where everyone wants something from me, you just wanted to do the right thing." He paused. "I trust you, Clara. That's rare for me now." Clara thought about her cramped apartment, her mother's medical bills, the constant struggle to make rent. She thought about her brother, who'd chosen the wrong side and paid with his life. She thought about Maria crying as she was escorted out, and Frankie's bitter face when he'd admitted his betrayal. "What happened to Frankie?" she asked suddenly. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He's alive. Exiled to Florida with a monthly allowance, enough to live on, not enough to matter. He can never come back to Chicago, never contact anyone in the organization again. If he breaks those rules, the deal's off. He met her eyes. I couldn't kill family no matter what he did. But I couldn't keep him close either. So he gets to live with what he did alone for the rest of his life. It was a mercy, Clara realized, but also a punishment, being cut off from everything and everyone he'd known, living on the charity of the cousin he'd betrayed. If I stay, Clara said carefully, I'm not becoming a criminal. I won't help with anything illegal. I wouldn't ask you to. Your value is in what you are, honest, observant, moral. I have plenty of people who'll do illegal things. I need someone who'll tell me when I'm crossing lines I shouldn't cross. Lorenzo smiled slightly. Consider it a conscience for hire. Clara looked around the study, at the books lining the walls, the art that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, the windows overlooking grounds that required a full staff to maintain. This was a different world, dangerous, complex, morally gray. But it was also a world where her instincts, her observations, her brother's lessons about seeing wrong and speaking up actually mattered. I want my mother taken care of, she said. Full medical coverage, not just for emergencies. And I want to promise that if I see something I can't accept, I can walk away without consequences. Done and done. Lorenzo stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the family, Clara. She shook his hand, feeling the weight of the decision. She was crossing a line, stepping into a life she'd never imagined. But maybe that's what one whispered warning had really been, not just a way to save Lorenzo's life, but a doorway into something else entirely. One more thing, Lorenzo said, reaching into his desk. He pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to her. Inside was a simple gold necklace with a small pendant, a key. In my family, this symbolizes trust, Lorenzo explained. You hold the keys to my home, my secrets, my confidence. Wear it as a reminder that you belong here now. Clara fastened it around her neck, feeling the weight of the pendant against her chest. As she left the study that morning, no longer a maid, no longer invisible, but something new and undefined, she passed her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who'd arrived at this mansion 3 months ago. That woman had been surviving, invisible, keeping her head down. This woman had power, respect, and purpose. She never sought it, never wanted it. But one whispered warning in the dark had shifted the balance of an entire power war, and now she stood at the center of it all. Clara touched the key pendant at her throat and smiled. Sometimes the quietest voices change everything. The end.